Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Healing and Freedom Journey. Mark DeJesus here, your brother from another mother, bringing you insights along the way. I'm all about mental, emotional, and relationship health. If you are too, you've arrived at a great place today. What I want to get into is the subject of attachment styles. And this is a subject amongst many others. I get a lot of questions of people writing and asking, can you address this? Can you address what your insights are, what you've discovered, what you see in this? And so I want to do that and provide some observations, some helps along the way, some things that have been helpful for me along my journey as well, too. So we're going to talk about your attachment style and how it impacts your mental health. I want you to be able to understand how you connect and how you bond, how that impacts your relationship world, and recognizing your relationship world impacts your mental health. As I talk about so much in my resources and materials, mental health is highly impacted by relationships. How you relate to God, how you relate to yourself, how you relate to the world around you, how you relate to what you've been through, which then impacts how you relate to people today. All this stuff impacts how we show up in relationships. And some aspects in how we relate are great, wonderful, well-developed. But there are other aspects of how we relate that are not healthy. They're not helpful for our journey. And so recognizing your current relationship struggles can bring up, okay, what has been my relationship history? And when we talk about relationship history, what we want to talk about is the beginning. And the beginning involves your ability to attach and develop a healthy bond, which goes back to mom and dad, which then also leads into your relationships growing up in your home and also in life as well. So I want to get into that. Do you find yourself in your current relational world, in your mental health journey, you have these factors that keep working against you, patterns that keep happening? It may help you to recognize your attachment style and attachment issues that could be working against you. Now, the concept of attachment styles goes back to the 1950s when they were studying parents who had left children after World War II, and they noticed the depression that the children struggled with in being separated from their parents. This brought about a deeper awareness to the bond and attachment that children make or do not make in their birth and early childhood. And so it brought to center stage this subject, and for decades they've been looking at this as a factor. And I believe it's a legitimate factor in understanding how well you bond today. Do you bond and connect and relate in healthy ways? If you had a good initial bond in your childhood, that can help contribute to being equipped well. And if not, and I see this over and over again, the struggle that so many of us have had in realizing back, I didn't necessarily have a healthy, strong bond for whatever reason growing up. And so when it comes to attachment and the subject of attachment issues and attachment style, I have to bring people back to the power of the bond. When you first emerge from your mother's womb, you were designed to immediately bond with her. Physically, emotionally, can connect with her. You actually rest upon her body, flesh to flesh. You experience the comfort that bond of your mother brings about. Then there's also the emotional connection that develops, and then throughout childhood and throughout teen years, and leading into releasing you into your adult years, there is a healthy bond that is developed. You were designed from birth in your childhood to bond with your father as well, both father and mother, to feel connected to your father's love, to feel connected to his affection, to his validation, to his approval, the words of love spoken, words of love demonstrated. This sets the stage for your emotional development in your life. Mother and father, they are designed to bond with us in healthy ways to then release us. Now, many people think, oh, a healthy bond. You ask an adult person, how is your bond with your parents? And some will say, great. My mom's my best friend. My dad's my best friend. And we are, and it's like, it's not necessarily that's the picture we're painting. nothing wrong with being close to your parents, but you were actually designed to bond, but then be released to leave father and mother so that then you can live as an overcoming adult and your relationship with your parent begins to shift. I've talked about this in numerous broadcasts in the past, especially when I talk about toxic ties and leaving father and mother and that whole concept and understanding. But let's talk about the father bond, because when you bond well with your father, it helps fill your need to feel loved and to feel safe. He also helps you relate to a man, to relate to men in healthy ways, to develop your confidence that you can step out and face the world and take risks and be willing to learn new things and take on new ventures, to know that you're validated and approved of, that he sees you, that he notices you, he's proud of you. A father sets the stage for love and safety in the household. He also sets the stage for you to understand who God is as a father, because how we relate to God as a father is heavily influenced by what our earthly father could or could not or did not provide and resource us with. Now, bonding with your mother brings about a whole avenue of nurture that is unique to her, fills your ability to experience nurture and experience comfort. This also helps you develop a sense of self-nurture and self-comfort. This is what she brings about, helps equip you so that you in yourself can connect to nurturing yourself, to being able to comfort yourself, to find comfort. And also this helps us to learn how to receive comfort from the Holy Spirit, because that's who he is. He's a comforter. So nurture of a mother helps you to be able to calibrate your emotions, to be able to calibrate how you're feeling, to be able to calibrate what you're going through and be able to navigate that in a healthy way. She helps through nurture to put your struggles into perspective, helps you to work through and recover from hard days and hard times that you're going through. See how this bond is so important. And many in their mental health journey realize, I don't think I received that. Or what they're manifesting is revealing to themselves, I'm needing some healing in this area. So it leads us to the question, did you develop a bond, a strong bond and connection, attachment to your parents in the early and ongoing stages of development in your life? A connection that continued, a connection that equipped you. And you can see in your adult years, you don't have to do this in shame, blame, condemnation. You don't have to do this in bitterness. You can do it in sobriety and just recognizing, you know what, it happened or it didn't happen, or here were some good things, but there were some connections that just didn't take place. The journey of bonding is so important, and many of us didn't experience healthy transitions of being equipped, of learning how to develop healthy independence, but yet learning how to relate to other people in a way where we can connect. We're not just islands, and we can learn to express our needs and develop healthy give and take in relationship. These attachment styles that I'm going to get into really come out, especially when we pursue romance and when we develop the desire to get married and the desire to develop a family. We can really see where these attachment issues come about. And so many are realizing their current struggles of relating are influenced by the attachment issues that they have. The good news is that these attachment areas of your life, they can be worked on, they can be recognized, you can experience healing, they can be improved. These aren't permanent things, but you're going to need to become aware. And you're going to need to do some relationship work. You got to be willing to roll up your sleeves and work on some things, because it's going to involve dealing with mindsets that have followed you since childhood. So let me give you the first one that we could look at here. This is kind of the good enough attachment, I'm going to call it. Nobody's perfect. Nobody handles relationships perfectly. There is a picture of what good enough attachment can look like. And it's called secure attachment. And in this, you're able to, this kind of gives us a calibration of what we want to grow towards. Number one is you're able to connect well with others, as well as be content with yourself when alone. So you have this ability to be with others, be by yourself, and live in a rhythm. And yes, we have our lonely days. Yes, you have, you have your extremes that you can bounce into, but overall, you're living in a healthy equilibrium of this. Number two is you can regulate your emotions in relationships. This goes back to emotional intelligence, because a big aspect of emotional intelligence involves recognizing what you're feeling, being able to work through and regulate your emotional world. Number three is you can communicate well in relationships and express your needs in healthy ways. You're able to do that because it was developed in your life. As a child, you learned to do that and communicate that. And growing up, it was developed in you. This is something that needs to be equipped and allowed in the home and encouraged. And also, number four, you can communicate the need for support and help when needed. This helps you to interact with others in a healthy way and to help you recognize, I need people, but to call upon help in a way that's not excessively needy. And also recognizing you're not an island and you don't have to do life all on your own. You can rely on relationships in a healthy way and communicate the need for support in a healthy way too. So let me give you 3 areas to be aware of. And the third, it's actually 4. This is number 1. But I want to land somewhere in number 4 because it involves a lot of people I work with in the area of obsessive compulsiveness, especially relationship OCD, and especially in perfectionism, obsessive compulsive tendencies, okay? So the first one that I'm going to look at here is what's called anxious attachment. It can also be called preoccupied because the person is anxiously preoccupied with the relationship. And anxiety drives their perception. It drives a lot of their behavior. They're very hypersensitive about how they feel about the relationship. They may be showing a form of intense obsessiveness. Now, when I say obsessiveness here, I don't mean necessarily OCD obsessiveness in the sense of disturbance, although that can be there. It's more being fixated, a constant thinking, this intense infatuation. It can even move into heavy fantasy and just too much, and especially too much, too soon, too quick, but this high anxious intensity that's there. This is an anxious form of attachment. They weren't equipped. A lot of times they were neglected, and through trauma and neglect and various wounds, there's a high level of anxiety. So they manifest a great deal of neediness. They need a lot of checking in with. We can use the term high maintenance, and it can be emotionally high maintenance. They can be very clingy, and they can be very demanding with their clinginess too. Have a sense of, you got to do this. They can be very controlling with their anxiousness. They need a lot of reassurance because they have trust issues. In my pastoral work, when I see this in action, I saw this in my church. I see it in people that try too hard relationally. They just try too hard. They may love bomb a lot, just too much too soon. They don't let relationships progress in their natural pathway. They overthink, they read into things too much, they get hurt too easily, and they see themselves in such a low way, they're looking for somebody to rescue them. They're looking for somebody to get them out of the prison they're in because they see themselves in such a low way. And because of this, they can put too much pressure on the relationship. And then if somebody brings out, hey, this is a little too much, they get really hurt, get defensive, and then they can get bitter and angry. And they can push people away because they do too much, they try too hard. Some can even smother people. There can be an intense jealousy that's there. The jealousy can lead to paranoia. There's a driving force of fearing the other person. If you're in a romantic relationship, that there's going to be infidelity. They're deeply, deeply insecure. And they see themselves in a low way, and they see another person in a positive way, sometimes as a rescuer. They fear being without the other person. And I believe anxious attachment people can be very vulnerable to codependency and unhealthy enmeshment. And so this is an important factor to understand. They approach relationships from a place of fear of losing the relationship. So they're on guard and hypervigilant to make sure that they don't lose this. But they can get lost in their anxious world of preoccupation, which can even go into fantasy bonds with the other person and inordinate affection, just very unhealthy places. Okay. And this is a spectrum of things that you have to understand. Okay. When conflict happens to somebody with anxious attachment, they can spin out. Like, are you mad at me? Are you mad at me? I gotta make this better. I gotta make this okay because I can't handle this. I can't handle this. I can't handle this feeling. The core abandonment they have, the core fear that they have is abandonment. The core fear is abandonment, and they wear it because there's just this hypersensitive nervous system. Okay. So I'm bringing out this, I bring out first a good enough kind of attachment style. And now I'm bringing out one ditch that people can go into. Now we're going to bring another ditch out, which is the avoidant. And this can be seen as dismissive, whereas the other one is preoccupied. In this, it's someone who is relationally dismissive, emotionally dismissive. They're disconnected to emotional world. They can give off a sense as though they don't need relationships. They present themselves as independent. They're self-reliant. Their life can come across like they just don't need anybody. They don't really see a need for relationship or needing others. They can look down on others. The anxious attachment style sees themselves down and sees other people in a sense up. I need you. Whereas an avoidant sees other people in a way of looking down on them, and that people can't be trusted, can't bother, don't need them. And it could take them a long time to develop trust in somebody. And they can have a poor view of others, and they avoid vulnerability. People are not to be trusted. They avoid intimacy, and they avoid long-term closeness. They just don't get too close to anyone because they fear getting hurt, but they never actually feel that fear. Does that make sense? They fear being hurt, but they never even get close to that fear. It's like that fear of being hurt is way over there, but any movement towards it, they have a wall of separation so far away from even that thing being felt. They will avoid and back away before you ever even get close to that. So they never actually feel it. Whereas an anxious person, anxious attachment is always feeling that fear. They're always letting that fear drive them. So they keep this fear suppressed. So they're not really connected to it. Some can be in a place where you call it emotional repression, right? When you're emotionally repressed, you're just not connected. So you're not connected to things. You don't even really know it. It's like beyond your awareness. Suppression is where it rises up and you suppress it. So they can often have both of that. And they can struggle to maintain serious long-term relationships. And they live with an ongoing value that kind of follows them. I don't need people. I'm just going to do life on my own. Some can get tired and bored easily in relationships, so they lose interest and move on. Some say, you know what, I'm going to lose my sense of independence and my ability to just have choices and options, right? Men, historically, are seen as being notorious for this. Women can struggle with this as well, of a kind of disconnect. And I'm not really needing intimacy. They don't put a lot of time and value in it. These people can be hard workers. They can be achievers. They can be some of the most successful CEOs, pastors, leaders. Not always, but often. Now, when the hard stuff of relationships happen, when things get, intimate and things start, the goofiness of our lives, the sin issues, the struggles, the weaknesses, the conflict arises. They avoid it. They escape. They don't know what to do when the other person expresses struggle or negative emotions. So they just get away. They're just avoidant. They escape. Somebody starts sharing things, they just get really uncomfortable. So they have a lot of anxiety, but they're not connected to it. They're not in this constant anxious state. The fear is pushed way down. They don't show it and they don't connect to it. So they just don't bother relationally because they haven't had a good sense of attachment. They were neglected, or in their trauma, they went into survival mode. I got to do life on my own. because relationships are messy. I don't want to deal with it. And look at these people. They look at other people's struggles and they go, ugh, look at that problem this person has. Look at this area. I don't want to deal with that. This is just messy. They can tend to look at relational problems with disdain and contempt. And the avoidant, you'll often see anxious attachment going to help, going to therapy. The avoidant often doesn't go to help until things get really bad, until things get really difficult. They're losing their marriage. They are they're having mental health things manifest. Now they're having nervous breakdowns, and they go, "Oh my goodness, I gotta deal with it." And you realize they're not connected to their emotional world. Okay, so they fear abandonment, just like the anxious, but they're disconnected to it, and they live in avoidance of getting anywhere near it. So they're avoiders, whereas the anxious attachment lives in the constant angst and stirring of fight, in flight, of that nervousness and feeling of abandonment. So now let me get into this last one, because many people that I'm working with in the OCD arena, as many of you know, I'm the author of the book, The OCD Healing Journey. I work with a lot of people in this area. My history is been involved in my journey. A big part of OCD is relationship OCD. And I had a hard time connecting to the subject of anxious or avoidant, because I would sit there and kind of go, well, there's a lot there I relate to. And there's a lot to I relate there. Couldn't pin it down, because really what I was dealing with is a sense of anxious avoidant. It's a combination of both, and you are influenced by both aspects, and you can waffle and swing and bounce between the two. This is called disorganized attachment as well. And it's like a disorganized confusion over the person, who you have both anxious and avoidant. You can bounce back and forth between the two. Relationships could be something you want, like you want to get married, but then you're afraid of it and you don't want to deal with it. Don't we see this a lot in life, right? So relationships are confusing. They feel confusing. They feel unsettling because you have unsettled emotions. You don't know how to deal with it and put your finger on it. So you have an up and down, left and right, kind of all over the place. And you can't land. You can't relax in relationship. So you can swing from wanting to get away from someone, and then you can also have extreme neediness. You can, on one hand, be insensitive to another person, right? Like you just, I don't want to deal with that. Get agitated and angry. But on the other hand, you can then crumble into a pile of, I need help and I need people to be there for me. So people in this can also be very antisocial, even though that's what you need. But social interactions can trigger that chaos, can trigger that confusion to you. And many in this area, they can be resistant at taking responsibility and kind of be like everybody else. Everybody else is, I don't know. I just, And then when they look at themselves, they can look at themselves with a lot of shame and contempt and just beat themselves up for all the chaos that they feel. Now, relationship OCDers in general, I find fit into this area. This is why your emotional world feels so discombobulated, because there wasn't a solid bond developed in your life, solid equipping. So you bounce between extreme neediness and pushing away. I got to do life on my own. And you can't land. I jokingly say this to people I've talked to. I say, this reminds me of my dog, Levi. I'm not comparing any of you to my dog, so don't take it that way. But it is kind of funny because my dog, Levi, has a lot of anxiousness. He's a rescue, and I've developed this great bond with him, but the bond has been an interesting pathway, because when I walk into the house, he comes running up. He's got this anxiety of, you're here. But then as I approach him, he can kind of withdraw. And he's like, I need you. No, I don't. I need you. Oh, you're scary. I need you. Oh, and so I jokingly in my home talk about, this is an interesting anxious avoidant kind of response here. And I look at how Levi acts and I go, I see that in a lot of us. We want relationship. We want to live in the beauty of it. But then we're uncomfortable in it and we want to get out of it. But then we want it, then we withdraw, then we want it, then we withdraw. So where do you find that you fit in to these areas? Now, there are many, many books out there that you can get on attachment issues, attachment styles. There's even tests you can take and things. Some people go way into it and deep into it. I think this can be helpful understanding of just how you approach relationships in general. Do you have this needy, try too hard kind of anxious world that you live in relationally? Or are you dismissive? And many dismissive ones wouldn't even watch a broadcast like this. They just don't even bother. Or do you feel like you have a combination of those at work? Here's some things that I would say are helpful along the journey, along the way. Number one, in order for anything that I'm saying to be helpful to you, you have to value relationships. Relationship health has to be a value for you. There was a place in my journey where I look back. I was involved in ministry. I was on staff at a church, and everything was just go, go, go. And the projects I was doing, the things I was achieving, I didn't make room for just simple relationship development and make space to just be Mark. Now, I got to give it to myself. There wasn't much room for that because I was seen as Pastor Mark. I was seen in that role. So I didn't have space and room to just be myself. And I feel for people that get locked into this role, and it's tough for people to just relate to him as a person. So it took many years later of debilitating anxiety and obsessive compulsiveness and panic attacks and depression to go, okay, I need to learn how to relate to people now. This has got to be a value. If achievement and the next project and money and success and all these things you go after, if that's the primary thing you chase, then these things aren't going to mean anything to you because you'll revert back to all your survival mechanisms. The second thing I want to say is that it's helpful to be aware in love, in grace. If you do any self-beating, it's not going to serve your journey. It's got to be done in compassionate grace, where you see where do you tend to land the most. And I know there's tests you can take, but I also want to encourage you to be self-aware. Where do you tend to go? Because the more self-aware you are, the more you can tether and calibrate yourself, where you can catch yourself. If you're anxious, if you have an anxious style where you go, it's okay. I don't have to act on this, what I'm feeling right now. I'm safe. I'm all right. I'm okay. Take a deep breath. Right? I'm all right. And the avoidant could go, all right, I'm pushing people away. I'm dismissing people. I'm dismissing emotion. It's okay. I got to make room for it. Now, in my world of work, I encourage people to understand the rejection route, to understand the rejection mindset and how it impacts people. Because when you, in areas of your life that have not been settled and rooted in love, a rejection mindset comes in. Rejection inflames a sense of separation. And so you'll see the anxious and the avoidant in this. Because in that sense of separation, the anxious lives with anxiety. You know, Paul in Romans 8 called it a spirit that makes us a slave to fear in the NIV translation, right? You get bound to fear and you just act out of it. You're just totally unsettled most of the time. The avoidant senses that separation and goes, whatever, I'm not even going to bother. And I talk about that in the rejection book, where it's a sense of like, I'm just going to do life on my own. Underlying this is the root of abandonment. And most of our battlegrounds lead back to a fear of abandonment. Most of them. It goes down to, I'm going to be alone. I'm going to die. I'm going to die alone. And then it can go into more despairing things. I'm going to die alone. I'm going to go to hell. I'm going to die alone. You know, whatever it is. I'm going to go to jail, die alone. Some obsessive compulsives can fear in their thoughts and things like that, right? But this abandonment issue, I will be alone and die. I'll die alone. It is debilitating to the human heart. Now, many are highly connected to it. Others are disconnected to it. They don't want to feel it. They don't want to feel it, but they still act out of that. Okay? So I find in my journey, understanding the rejection root, because when you see it in yourself and you see it in you'll see it everywhere. Like, my goodness, we're all just we're all just trying to fulfill our need to be loved, and we're struggling with it so bad. So I hope this makes sense to your journey and your processing. But you also need to understand, okay, your current relationship issues, your current relationship needs. And I wrote there number 4, recognize what needs go back to childhood. Because most of them do. They do. They go back to things that were either met or not met in our lives. And you'll have to go, okay, what I'm battling with now has a history to it. And you don't have to chase this down. You don't have to look at it with a magnifying glass. Let it bubble up to you and be obvious, because a lot of it's very obvious. If you're super needy in relationships, it reveals there were lots of unmet needs in your development as a child. It just is. It's not. Maybe they've been unfulfilled in your life. Now, many Christians will tell people, all you need is Jesus. You're so needy. You need to get this need fulfilled in God. And there's an implication there that's unhealthy. The implication in many Christians' communication is you just need God, and that's all you need. You don't need humans. Because those people may actually be communicating from an avoidant standpoint. Like, all you need is God. People who talk like that, all I need is God. You can't rely on man. They're avoidance. And they dismiss these emotional needs because theirs weren't met. They said, I can't bother. And then their Christian life, they go, God, you're all I need. It's me and you, Jesus. And they dismiss the need for relationship. No, we need relationship. But we got to recognize where we run away or where we try too hard. And this involves facing the fear. What's the fear? If you're an anxious attacher, you're going to have to learn how to practice rest and learn how to recalibrate the RPMs and learn how to rest in the fact I'm loved and I'm okay. You may have to work through codependency. You may have to work through recognizing your emotions in healthier ways. You may have to learn to starve compulsions, but learn to entering into rest. You know, the avoidance, you're going to have to go, I need to make room. I need to make room because I don't know how to connect to my emotions. People ask me how I feel. I go, I don't even know. Make room for relationship practice. Make room in your life to go, how do I feel? Being able to check in with yourself. How do I feel? What does this emotion mean? How does this impact those around me? And what I want to encourage you is practice. Practice, practice, practice. Be willing to work at it. And the greatest way to practice is in real life relationships. This isn't necessarily done through texting or online people, but actual human beings you're interacting with. Face-to-face being the best, obviously phone call as well too, that kind of, audio way. I know we live in a world of texting and email too, but allowing yourself to have social interactions where you learn to practice and at different levels, where it's just acquaintances, people that you might just know, but it's not a lot of depth. And you allow there to be room that maybe this will grow closer. Maybe it won't. It's okay. And I'm going to let it organically take its course, right? But also, if you're married or if you're engaged or you're moving towards marriage, of recognizing how this impacts how you relate and learn to practice and be willing to make corrections along the way as you're practicing. You have to allow yourself to practice. You're not faking it. You're practicing. I pray this was a blessing to your life and your journey. These have been some helpful perspectives for me. If this video was a blessing, click that like button, hit the subscribe button, share this with a friend or loved one. Say, this helped me in my life, in my journey. I mentioned the book, Exposing the Rejection Mindset. Great place to go in understanding these root areas of our heart and our life. Of course, the heart healing journey lays out a framework of what does it look like to be more heart aware, be more emotionally aware in a healthy way, because how we relate is everything. And of course, my latest book, The OCD Healing Journey, gets into this specific battleground that many have and many are struggling with. Well, it's been a blessing to share these insights with you. Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. This is your brother from another mother saying, I'll be back with more insights along the way. But in the meantime, y'all, I'm out.